This is my inset version of Topsy Turvy Love, which can be found on my Facebook group. You can see that the first stitch and last stitch of each row line up horizontally with the colours along the pattern. This is the standard way of charting both inset and generally what I've noticed overlay mosaic. This is how I will always chart my inset patterns. However, to convert my chart for interlay, and this also works by the way if you want to convert your charts from inset to overlay, I have shifted the first stitch and the last stitch so that they look kind of out of alignment with the rest of the charts. So if you could see this line here of the pattern, it doesn't line up properly with the edges, and this is intentional. This makes the chart really super easy to read. So what I'm going to do is I've got for you here 2 balls of wool, a grey and a pink, and I'm going to show you how we can work interlay mosaic crochet right from the beginning. But I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm not going to use the whole width of the chart and the whole repeat. I'm just going to kind of fold it over so we've got a small section of the chart to look at. So I'm going to attach the chart to this kind of secretary's typist stand. Comes with a clip to clip it to the top so that my paper doesn't flap about. To be honest, I don't actually use this stand at all really. I actually use an app and just follow it on my phone, but it's pretty handy just to highlight, for the sake of a tutorial, what's going on here. So this typist stand comes with this kind of clippy removable ruler with this section here that is really useful for highlighting where you are. And it just so happens that the width of the highlighted section just happens to perfectly match the size of the squares on my chart, which is just sheer luck, to be honest. So I'm going to highlight row 3 because that's where all of my patterns will start in terms of the pattern rows. So here we've got 5, 10, 15, 19 stitches wide. Okay, so I have prepared my setup rows for Interlay Mosaic Crochet. I'm using this kind of whitish yarn and this pink yarn. So on my chart, if you have a look at my chart, I've charted 2 white rows and then my pattern starts at row 3. This is how I always chart. So as to kind of reflect what's going on with the yarn. So here you see my 2 base rows are white in my pattern. I've done 2 rows in the white of UK double crochets, US single crochets, going through both loops, and then I've changed my yarn colour and I've done 2 rows of UK double crochets, US single crochets through both loops of pink. Okay. And then now this is where the fun starts to happen. in row 3. So I'm just going to move my ruler on my secretary's paper stand down to row 3. I'm highlighting in here the stitches for row 3. Now, Interlay Mosaic Crochet is super duper easy to read. As you can see, I've got no X's, no O's, nothing to mark drop down stitches. And by the way, you can use the same technique for converting inset to overlay if you want. And the rules are quite simple. The first square is the colour of the yarn for that row. If a square is the same colour as the first square, it's a drop down stitch. If it's not, it's a non-drop down stitch. Except for the only ones that are the exception are the first stitch and the last stitch, which will be non-drop down stitches, just to stay, well, you've got nothing to wrap your yarn around for a start, so you've got no choice but to make a regular non-drop down stitch for those. So I've changed my yarn colour and I've done my chain 1. So according to my chart, my first stitch is just going to be a regular non-drop down stitch in white, and then I need to do 3 drop down stitches. Okay, so I always find that on the first setup of the pattern is the most difficult one, really. It's the same for everything, all sorts of crochet. So this is the next stitch along. So the stitch that we're targeting on the drop down stitch is the one just below it, which is this one here. So let's do our yarn over, insert the hook into that stitch down there, into that hole, pop your work through the back and back to the front again, yarn over, draw through your loop, yarn over, draw your hook through 2, yarn over, draw your hook through 2. So you've completed your first drop down stitch. Okay, we need 2 more of those. When you're working lots of drop down stitches in a row, the next one's quite easy to find because it's where your drop down stitch just came out. So we're going to yarn over, insert the hook, pop out, yarn over, draw the loop through, yarn over, draw through 2, yarn over, draw through 2. Okay, so we've done 2 drop down stitches, we need 1 more. Okay, so let's consult our chart again. We've got 3 drop down stitches there. So according to our chart, we've got 4 stitches now that are not the same colour as our yarn colour. So we need to just do 4 regular non-drop down stitches. Okay, so you can see the next stitch just presenting itself there. So we're going to go in 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, back at our chart, we've got a drop down stitch, a regular stitch, a drop down stitch, and then 4 regular stitches. Okay, so let's just do that. Drop down, one regular, drop down. So you can see that's the next stitch. That's where you want your drop down stitch. So into that one, 4 regular ones. So just 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, let's look back at our chart. Okay, so we need 3 drop down stitches and just an end stitch. Yarn over, drop down, so that's the next stitch. Our drop down stitch needs to go into there. The last one's always a little bit tricky because you're right at the edge. Okay, and then we've got one more, just the end stitch that we need to do. If you're not confident with finding your end of row stitches, don't be too shy to use stitch markers. Okay, so that's it. We've finished our first pattern row. Now let's turn around. So chain 1 and turn. So we're going to do, just work into the back all the way along, but where we've got these little flaps, from where we've done our drop down stitches, we're going to anchor these stitches to the drop down stitches, making sure that we line them up. So we're going to take the back loop of the first flap, and we're going to make sure we carefully align it up with that drop down stitch, taking both loops of the drop down stitch. Now you will find that they will lean over slightly to the right, so you might need to really carefully pick up those drop down stitches when you're anchoring them. Okay, and then just yarn over, draw your yarn through, yarn over, draw your yarn through, and you're going to do that all the way across every time you need to anchor a stitch. Just take the back loop like so, take the drop down stitch, all the way along like that. So where you've got regular non-drop down stitches, you can just go ahead and just insert your hook as you usually would. And again, we've reached one of these drop down stitches. Now you don't need to anchor them all if you don't want to, but I like to anyway. And it is a bit fiddly when you've only got one to go through, but I don't think it's too much of a hassle to do it, so I just anchor all of my stitches. Okay, so I'm just going to work all the way to the end. like so. Again, we've got these stitches we want to anchor, so we're going to pick up the back loop, anchor it to the drop down stitch. Pick up the back loop, anchor it to the drop down stitch. This one's a bit fiddly because it's right at the end of a section of drop down stitches, so dun dun dun. Okay, so now we've got to do our colour change. So we're just going to insert the hook into the last stitch along, draw one up, okay, I'm just going to drop my grey down, and I'm going to switch in my pink. So my pink, when I'm switching it in, is at the back as it's facing me, and the grey is at the front. See? I'm just going to draw the pink through and give the grey a little bit of a tug. I'm not going to be shy, I'm going to pull it quite tight. Chain one in pink, turn, and I'm always, as I said before, I'm always going to do my first stitch as just a regular non-drop down stitch. Okay, so let's look at the chart. Okay, we've done row 3, so I'm just going to move my chart up. Oh, this bit of a boring line actually. So the yarn colour is pink. Don't have any pink squares on this row at all. So this row is not going to have any drop down stitches in pink. So I'm just going to, okay, so row 4 was a bit of a boring row really, wasn't it? It's had no drop down stitches at all, so I completed it off camera, and I've changed to my white yarn again, and I've already done my first border stitch, edge stitch, and I'm just going to shift my ruler up to row 5. Okay, so row 5, it's a white row, so I've done my edge stitch. We've got 2 regular stitches because they're not the same colour as the edge stitch, they're just regular, they're not drop down, so I'm going to do 2 more of those. And then I'm going to do 4 drop down stitches, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so dum, dum, dum. See, if we're looking where the next stitch is, this is the one we're targeting. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 drop down stitches. There we go. Then if we look back at our chart, we've got one regular, one drop down, one regular, one drop down, one regular. Okay, so let's do that. Okay, so let's look back at the chart. We need 4 drop down stitches and then 3 regulars to end it, because we've got our 2 regulars and then our edge stitch. Okay, so there it is. Locate the stitch that you need to go down into. It's that one. So we need 4 of those. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we've got 3 stitches to the end. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. The last one is always so fiddly. Okay. Good. Dum dum dum. Chain, turn. So we've got 3 regular ones. And then we've got 4 to anchor. 1, 2, 3, 4. Lining up with 4 drop down stitches in front, well, on the front of the work. Okay, so we've just completed row 5, and you can see the patterns coming along quite nicely. Row 4 was a bit boring for pink, so I thought I'll just show you row 6, but you can kind of see that it's really, really very simple. They're just 2 stitches, 2 types of stitch that you need to use, a nice anchoring return pass to make sure that you lose all of those flaps and don't have any chains. And the chart is super, super duper easy to read. So I've started row 6. I've already done my first edge stitch in pink. Let me just move my chart up. The tripod's not really behaving, to be honest. I'm going to move my chart up to row 6. Okay, so for row 6, it's a pink row. I've already done my edge row. Straight away I've got to do 2 drop down stitches in pink. Okay, so 2 drop down stitches. Again, that's the next stitch. Locate your stitch in the where you need to insert your drop down, and it's there. So we need to do 2 of those. 1, and another one, 2. Now I find sometimes when you're doing a drop down stitch and you've got a drop down stitch in the other just next to it, you've got to kind of get your thumb a little bit and just shift it out of the way. Like, get out of my way. When you're popping out that hook. Okay, so there we go. I've done 2 drop down stitches, and Let's look back at our chart. We need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 non-drop down stitches, see? So you see the next stitch just about presenting itself. So there it goes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And now we've got a drop down stitch coming up. You know you're going right when your drop down stitches are landing on a pink or on the same colour. So if your drop down stitch, for example, you land and you're not on the right colour, you know you're going slightly wrong. But we've landed and the next drop down stitch is heading into pink, so we're okay. So there, again, because we've got that one, just kind of shift it out the way with your thumb. Okay, drop down stitch, and then six more non-drop down stitches, and as I said, it just presents itself a little bit. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You need 2 drop down stitches, and look, like magic, we've reached those pinks again. So yarn over, drop down stitch, and another one, and an edge stitch to finish the row. And you can see the pattern is coming along very, very nicely. And you just continue on that thread, just shifting your pattern that you're reading up one at a time and following the same rules. If the square is the same colour as the edge, it's a drop down stitch. If it's not, it's a not drop down stitch. So here we go, edge stitch, 2 non-drop downs, 2 drop downs, 1 non-drop down, 2 drop downs, 3 non-drop downs, 2 drop downs, 1 non-drop down, 2 drop downs, and 2 non-drop downs in your edge stitch. And that's it. That's Interlay Mosaic Crochet. Super easy to read, no chains, no ends, nothing to weave in. Have fun.